Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson, Michael Grumbine, and Dan Coates.
Hey everyone, welcome to the new podcast from theonering.com. Exploring Tolkien, we decided to give it a little bit of a facelift and to get away from the name. But more about that later. I'm here. My name is Jonathan. I'm here with Michael Grumbine and Dan Coates.
Hey, how's it going?
As we continue our jaunt, our stroll, our leisurely look at the scenery along the way through the Silmarillion. And we are on the second to the last chapter of the Quenta Silmarillion with still the Akalabeth and of the Rings of Power and the Third Age coming after that. And this week we're doing chapter 23 of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin. And we have a lot to discuss because we have so many people. We even have Turin coming back into this episode.
Very briefly.
Flash
cameo.
We can mention him. But before we jump into that, I do want to jump into...
All that is gold does not glitter.
And I want to do this in a new way. We were called Window on the West for a year, actually. We've let's see, we started it, I think, the first week in May last year. So we're almost at a full year of podcasting at this point. And we named ourselves Window on the West because we thought it was a great name when it came to, referencing Tolkien, but it not necessarily being so overtly like maybe some other Tolkien podcasts, like the Green Dragon Brew House or something like that, which you're like clearly referencing that's something from Tolkien. I don't know. Think what you may on that. However, so we were just like, you know what? No, if people look at Window on the West, they're like, what is the Window on the West? Because that's essentially what, nobody really knows. It's a reference to where Faramir took Frodo and Sam, and they saw Gollum jumping into the pool below. Yeah. The
Henneth Anun.
Yeah. Henneth Anun. And so, you'll see in our intro that we do have it's like you're behind a waterfall looking out over, the land as it would be in the Lord of the Rings. So we renamed it Exploring Tolkien because really that's what we're doing. And when you want to find a podcast about Tolkien, you kind of want to explore Tolkien. So we just renamed it Exploring Tolkien.
Also, we'll be doing lots of other works of Tolkien as the months go on. So it isn't just going to be about Lord of the Rings or anything related to Lord of the Rings.
So the biggest adjustment you might have to make is in your podcast player, instead of being the last podcast in your list of all the podcasts, because it was at W, it's going to be like kind of in the top third now. So I realized that when I went to download the latest podcast, I was like, where's it's not at the bottom anymore. I had to scroll all the way up. So I hope
it's not too late. To just put an A in there.
So
Exploring Tolkien.
Triple A Tolkien.
Most importantly of all, I would like to know what are our new pronouns for this podcast, please, because that's what we need to have.
I was going to let you decide what yours are first, Michael. So go ahead.
Faye.
I always like ours is and theirs is. Those are my favorite.
Ours is and theirs is. That's acceptable too, especially in these chapters.
So, anyways,
Act 3 of the tragedy.
Yes. One other note though too. We're changing it to Exploring Tolkien, and we're going to be having this Friday or the Friday after this is released. We will be having our very first weekly live stream at this Friday, April 28th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. And we're going to be doing about a 2-hour live stream, I'm thinking 1 to 2 hours, with a bunch of guests. So we'll have the Middle-earth Mixer on, who I interviewed in our most recent podcast before this one. John Trent from Bounding into Comics is going to be there. John Carswell from the Tolkien Road will be there. I'll be there. I think Michael will be there. Dan, if your time, I know it's right in the middle of the day in California. It's really rough. I know.
We'll see.
But we'll see. And then also Steve Babb from Glasshammer, who talked with last year too. So we've got a nice cross section. We're going to talk Tolkien. We're going to talk other interesting news. and we're not going to keep it just to Tolkien. We'll expand outside of that too, but we'll have things to talk about, like the Gollum game that's coming up, about the Return of the King in theaters again, and how well it holds up, and how was your experience watching it in these tiny theaters it was in. At least is what it seemed like around here where I was. Anyway, but yeah, check that out. Friday, April 28th at noon on YouTube. So theonering.com, theonering.com/YouTube. You can do that, or you can go to youtube.com/theoneringcom, and you'll get there too. Also, if you just search The One Ring, I'm pretty sure we're the first result on YouTube, and you will get to that live stream. I'll post it on Twitter. I'll post it on Facebook. I'll probably live stream to those too. And I think we might even do I might even try and set up some live streaming of games when the Gollum game comes out. So that should be interesting. Cool. But yeah, check all that out. All right, boy, that's a lot of announcements. I feel like the beginning of a really long church service, like right before Easter week, and you're trying to announce everything that's coming up, and people are starting to already nod off. And
so, Dan, what do you think? Will if we put a tagline on this Friday live chat that it's episode whatever the last one was of the Babylon Bees exploring Lord of the Rings +1, just add the next step. It functions as episode whatever that was.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll go for it, right? They'll be happy.
Yeah, I'll run with the flagpole and see what they say. Yeah,
slap a B logo on it. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's great. I'll do that. No problem. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. All right, so let's jump into the second to the last, the penultimate chapter of the Quenta Silmarillion of Tuor, which is Fall of Gondolin.
Just be clear, not to be confused in case people are unfamiliar with the Silmarillion. The published Silmarillion has another section to it, or two.
Two other sections.
Yeah, it has, after this, it has a chapter called Akalabeth, right, and it has a chapter called Of the Rings of Power and the Third Age, which had, as it turns out, absolutely nothing to do with Amazon. But it has those two, and so that's part of the published Silmarillion, and we are still going to be reading
those. Absolutely. I guess, and you'd say this is the end of the first age is what we're getting through.
Right.
All right, so, Dan's
Big Thoughts.
You're on.
Well, I know you didn't want this to turn into a church service with a bunch of announcements, but my big thoughts lately have been kind of sermon-y.
Excellent.
I don't want to turn this into Dan's pulpit where I give sermons, but I'm always finding connections between what I'm reading in Tolkien and what I'm reading in the Bible. First of all, let me just say I really like the story of Tuor. Is that how you pronounce it? Tuor coming to Gondolin. After reading about Turin and Hurin, I feel like this is a nice change of pace where it's not just all bad stuff happening. Like you actually have like some glimmers and rays of hope, and so I feel like Tuor is the other half of the story, and maybe if we wanted to make like an analogy, like maybe you have Huor and Hurin, who are two brothers, just like Jacob and Esau. That one family seems to have all the cursing placed on them, and the other family seems to have like it. Maybe not the promise, or maybe the seed of promise, or like a prophecy of promise of good things that are good blessings that are coming. So I kind of saw that parallel right away, and I really like the story of Tuor, which is the son of Huor. I hope I'm pronouncing all those correctly. I'm sure
you are.
Yes. All right, great. So like you read the tragedy of the children of Hurin, and it's all bad, and then you finally get to this story, and you start seeing things that are good. Back at the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, Huor prophesied to Turgon that from you and from me a new star will arise, and so that's kind of like where this is starting to come into being, where Tuor makes it to Gondolin. He's wearing the armor that he gets from Ulmo, which tells Turgon, this is the messenger that I'm sending to you. So he comes in the right gear, and he marries the king's son, or the king. No, that would be bad. He marries the king's daughter.
That's Amazon's version.
That's 21st century. That's not.
He marries the king's daughter, Idril.
Yep.
Idril, and they have a son named Arendil. And so we kind of see how kind of like in the Bible, you have like this line of promise, like there's something that's going to come from this. And you also see on a smaller scale that Tuor and his family are used to save the remnant from Gondolin. So Gondolin gets destroyed in this chapter, and you kind of have a little mini U catastrophe where he comes in and he's able to save a small group of people out of that. So I don't know. I like this story arc. I think it balances out the children of Hurin quite a bit. Where when I was reading about Turin, it was just one thing after the other of just like, oh man, this is all bad. I don't know. So those are my thoughts.
Nice. Huh. So basically, that would make Turin Esau. I mean, they're cousins, not brothers, right. but unlike Esau and Jacob. But yeah, so you have the ill-favored son who, all Esau does is prefer stew to his inheritance, and all Turin does is, marry his sister and kill everyone around him. So, yeah, a little worse in Tolkien's world.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, since we're going to be saying his name a lot, we're all going to be on the same page here. Eärendil. Eärendil is how you say it.
Not Eärendil.
No.
Eärendil.
Ea, like the word for the whole material universe, is called Ea. Eärendil.
Yes.
Agreed. All right.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing. It struck me. Okay, a little bit of a detour here in my brain about what to do with Turin and Tuor is, could you create a story that has and granted, you might have to take a little bit of literary license with this, but you could create the story of Turin and Tuor, or weave them together into one long tale where there is this destruction and things are crazy are happening in the elven world, where we hear about Thingol and Nargothrond and all this sort of stuff. But then also what happens with Hurin and Huor, or with Tuor and Voronwe and all that. And it ends on a really good note of them, fleeing and meeting up with Dior or Elwing, the daughter, right? And that's that. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a good story there where you could take Turin and Tuor and create one sort of interwoven story where maybe you'd have to weave a little bit more than you would have than Tolkien did here, but something that would be really impressive in a cinematic view. Anyway, does that make sense? Where I'm going with that?
That's interesting.
Because then at the end they do come together at the end.
Yeah, they do, and it is a different kind of story in that regard. But it's funny because I think this is the only cameo that Tolkien has. Have we ever seen a cameo where he has intersection of two of his stories just cross each other? Now, obviously, they're related to each other, where we see the appearance of Turin. And he doesn't even say he's Turin. He says he was a tall man clad in black and bearing a black sword, which kind of narrows it down. And that's obvious. That's obviously Turin.
And it was talking too. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's right. This talking sword. He was this. If we remember from the Turin story, this is when Turin was heading north after believing the lies of Glaurung, and it was heading north to go back into Heathlum and search for his mother and his sister, and they crossed paths, which is an interesting thing because, here's why I think it's interesting. You see, one is the story of the working of the curse. So you see the Morgoth's curse at work through Glaurung, and the other crossways is coming literally east to west, or west to east, I should say, is the work of the Valar or Iluvatar, probably through Ulmo. And so you have literally these two major figures crossing paths, one operating under a curse and the other operating under the blessing of the Valar directly. And so I found that to be sort of an interesting figurative picture that Tolkien's giving us there.
Yeah, and why is it that Ulmo is this mover and shaker? I mean, let's go. Well, let's go in the beginning, right? Tuor, he was taken captive. He's got. He was a thrall, essentially, to chief of the Easterlings.
Lorgan. Yep.
Lorgan, yep. And he became an outlaw eventually. He escaped. And at this point, it says, Ulmo set in his heart to depart from the land of his fathers, Tuor. Ulmo set in Tuor's heart to depart from the land of his fathers, for he, Ulmo, had chosen Tuor as the instrument of his designs. And I was like, what? Wow. So Ulmo is really the mover and shaker. So in so many of these stories of elves and men, it's not any of the other Valar. Like they're not the ones that pull them
way
across.
more of a direct hand. Like I mean, we've seen him take a direct hand. He and Melian are probably the two of the, he's the only Valar that takes a direct hand in this age, at least on Middle Earth itself. And then she's the Maiar that's directly taking a hand, obviously. So, but it is interesting, right? Because he ups his game. Like he senses he knows it's coming to an end. The doom of the Noldor elves is coming to its fullness. Yeah. And so we even see a scene where at the end of this chapter he directly makes a plea to Manwë to lift the doom and forgive. The word is forgive that Tolkien uses, the Noldor, to forgive the Noldor and let them back. And Manwë's like, nope. It's going to have to be somebody besides you, which is interesting. But but throughout this, Ulmo takes a direct hand. So Tuor, can I say that Tolkien is showing us how much he loves Robin Hood? Like, how many times in this story has the major character been an outlaw, like running around with his band of men, a variety of sorts, like hounding the enemy, the evil, unjust ruler of the land, or whoever it is. So it's all Robin Hood. So Turin was Robin Hood, and before him, the sons of who were they? The 12 Barahir, rather. The followers of Barahir, and they were outlaws, and then now Tuor is an outlaw with a band, like harrying people. So I think Tolkien liked Robin Hood. But anyway, yep. So that story but the story is not about Robin Hood. Of course, it's about Tuor becoming the emissary of Ulmo. And I found it fascinating that Tuor is a man, but throughout this story, he becomes more and more and more elven, essentially. And I don't mean that in some genetic way, like he's changed, except almost. Well, he does. Almost. Right. So he there's a bunch of places where, so when he comes to Gondolin, and he appears before Turgon, there's a passage where it describes him, and I was not ready for it. So, okay. So it was that, okay, blah, blah. Then Tuor stood before Turgon, son of Vingolf, High King of the Noldor, and upon Turgon, the king's right hand, there stood Maeglin, his sister's son, but on his left sat Idril, Celebrimbor, his daughter. And all that heard the voice of Tuor marveled, doubting that this were in truth a man of mortal race. For his words were the words of the Lord of Waters that came to him in that hour. Reminds me, speaking of biblical passages, reminds me of like the Holy Spirit speaking to the apostles through the apostles in the Acts. It's Stephen appearing and the Spirit speaking through him. This is basically a similar. I see this as a parallel. Okay, so he appears there as not as a man of mortal race, and then the heart of Idril turns to him over a 7-year period, and the king of Gondolin holds him in such high favor he does not refuse him the hand of Idril. And it says that before that he became, this is Tuor, he became mighty in stature and mind and learned deeply of the lore of the exiled elves. So he's basically becoming like a Noldor. Tuor is. And then at the end of the chapter, just to skip to the end for this brief second, it said, in those days, Tuor felt old age creep upon him, and ever a longing for the deeps of the sea grew stronger in his heart. And by the way, I have to say, when he first sees the sea after wandering there and being essentially led there by Ulmo, he has this deep sea longing come upon him, which is a thing that happens to elves. Doesn't usually happen to men. I don't know any other time when we see the men captured by a sea longing. It's always the sea singing in the hearts of the elves. So he's elven in that regard. And the last sentence of the chapter, but in after days it was sung that Tuor alone of mortal men was numbered among the elder race and was joined with the Noldor whom he loved, and his fate is sundered from the fate of men. So he's I skipped the part where he sails off into the west with Idril. And came no more into any tale or song. So it's really, I mean, like he has basically become, I mean, he's a man, and therefore his child, Eärendil, is of both men and elves. But technically he's a half man, half, I know I'm saying this because this is no longer kosher did you all hear that what Wizards of the Coast did, since I'm an old
no more mixed races. There
are no more mixed races. Wizards of the Coast have decided that half elf is racist, half orc is racist. So, so anyway, he's a half elf, half man, and but Tuor, his father, is about as elven as you can get. So much so that even in his death, he joins the elves. By Iluvatar has him join the elves.
It's an interesting, because they're the two elf and human marriages in the Silmarillion. One ends up where they're both mortal, and one theoretically ends up where they're both elven.
Yeah, in a way, yes. Yeah. I was thinking about that too. And what Jonathan means is, of course, Elwing is the daughter of Beren and Luthien, right?
Well, no. What I mean is that he was joined with the Noldor. Tuor was joined with the Noldor with Idril, right? Mm-hmm. Wait, Idril? Yeah.
Idril,
yeah. And so he and his wife were Noldor, and Beren and Luthien became mortal. So Tuor and Idril are both elven, and Beren and Luthien were both mortal. So Luthien joined the mortal race, and Tuor joined the immortal race, and now we have balance again. No, I don't know.
That's really, well, that is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Because technically, before she was given a new body and resurrected, Luthien was half Maya, half elf.
That's true.
So it's a weird, like, I don't think genetics works that clearly with this, but I do like it. I do like what you're saying, which is one side of the family is very, very, very elven, even the humans, and the other side of the family is very, very, very human, even the elves. Yeah. Even the elf. So it is a fascinating joining.
So what's also interesting? I want to go back to the whole thing with Ulmo and how much he. Right, he plays such a part in this, but let's not forget that he spoke to Círdan before Turin got to, when Turin was in Nargothrond, and they sent two elves. Let's see, I think I have it bookmarked here, Gelmir and Arminas of Angrad's people to bring tidings of a great mustering of orcs and evil, blah, blah, because they told also that Ulmo had come to Círdan giving warning that great peril drew nigh in Nargothrond. So maybe Ulmo was like, all right, I'm going to just try this Turin guy. I'm going to, wherever he is, I'm going to send a warning out to them. And clearly that didn't work. So now he's on to the other guy, Tuor.
Plan B.
He's like, no, he's under a curse. I'm not going to try breaking that curse. We're just going to move forward and go to Tuor. Anyway, I thought that was interesting that even there was a small part he played, but the part he plays here is like he changes Tuor's heart. He changes, like, he makes him long. He sees the seven swans and he's like, okay, I've been here too long. But those seven swans are essentially a sign from Ulmo too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had never really read this thinking like, man, the part Ulmo plays is he is driving things forward. But even then. I just like Turgon just ignores him. They get
but let's talk about that. I think this is a fascinating thing, right? So the elves have been given Gondolin by Ulmo. If we remember, he's the one that led Turgon to Gondolin. That's right. Yeah. Gave them this refuge, which has lasted the longest of all the elven refuges. All of them have fallen. Nargothrond has fallen, Sirion and the lands of Heathlam under Fingolfin's heirs have fallen. All the other lands have fallen. Even Doriath has fallen, the great woodland kingdom. And the only ones left is Gondolin. So it's because of Ulmo's generosity and care for the elves that they even have this. And what happens? They become enamored, and they even know they're not supposed to become enamored. They remember the line that so we have this gem, this shining gem of Gondolin in this hidden city in the mountains, which is unbelievably beautiful and a wondrous place. And when Tuor gives the words of Ulmo to Turgon, it says, "Then Turgon pondered long the counsel of Ulmo, and there came into his mind the words that were spoken to him in Vinyamar. Love not too well the work of thy hands and the devices of thy heart, and remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west and cometh from the sea. But Turgon was become proud, and Gondolin as beautiful as a memory of elven Tyrion. So we have here them aspiring to make Gondolin Tyrion. And he trusted still in its secret and impregnable strength, though even a Vala should gainsay it. And after the Nirnaethor Nordiad, the people of that city desired never again to mingle in the woes of elves and men without, nor to return through dread and danger into the west. So here we have the two greatest flaws of the elves on full display. One is their love of beauty and goodness can be turned against them. And especially if they make the love and beauty, the goodness with their own hands, whether it's the Silmarils from the hands of Fëanor or the city of Gondolin from the hands of the Noldor that dwelt there. And so there's that can be turned against them, and then also their dismay and the sadness that they have. They feel this sadness and tragedy more deeply than humans do, I think. And so they just desire to completely withdraw from the world and trust to their city, even though
and preserve, right? Just like
preserve the good. Yep.
Silmarils were preservation, and Gondolin is a preservation of Tyrion.
They are the ultimate conservatives, and it is actually conservatism taken to its extreme, because every belief system has its extreme, which it can go to that is not good, and this is the extreme of conservatism. I so say I anyway. That's my Michael's minor thought.
This seems to be a common theme for Tolkien throughout the whole Silmarillion and probably everything he's ever written, maybe, that it seems like pride is at the core of everything that goes wrong. And I don't know. I think C.S. Lewis wrote about that at one point, saying like that maybe Satan's original sin was pride, and that in everything that we sin, like whatever sin that we're doing, we have at the core of that is a pride of thinking that we know better, and we are the ones that get to choose, not the Valar, not God. I don't know. It seems like there's like a common thread of pride in all of this. For Tolkien, he also connects that to pride in what you make, like the Silmarils or
the work of your hands. Yes,
the work of your hands. Yeah,
or what you want to possess. Because I feel of Maeglin and how Tolkien uses the word, he wanted to possess Idril, like his father Eöl possessed Erethdil.
That's right.
And it's not even the work of their hands. It's when they can possess the beauty and they clutch at it and they hold it so. The more you tighten your grip, the more it
slips through your
fingers, right? That's what it feels like a little bit.
Right, but and we're laughing because it's a cliche, but the reason cliches are cliches is because there's truth in them. So, and there really is truth here, and I find it fascinating. This is one of the many reasons why Tolkien is by no means childish literature of any kind, because his lessons are taken from hard truths, which is that even that if you seek to possess even the thing which is good inappropriately, to hold on to it too tightly, to desire it above all things else that are good, then you will fall, and people do, and civilizations do, and individuals do over and over again in his works. This is not a childish theme. This is something which requires some subtlety and care. So anyway, we mentioned Maeglin. So he is the traitor, the proverbial traitor that brings the whole thing down.
Yeah. Do we want to mention Voronwe and how he gets there and he finds the armor and the sword that Tuor finds that Turgon left years ago. Let me get to that point here. And he finds Voronwe, who was on a ship that Turgon had sent into the west. He's the last remaining person and the only one that Ulmo decided to let survive from this ship that Turgon was sent into the west. When did he send those into the west? Was that before the Nirnaeth? Or at what point did he send those ships?
I cannot remember. It was only a few weeks ago, but I can't.
Was it only one ship or was it multiple ships?
I thought it was more than one.
I thought it was more than one. Here's what he wrote. He wrote, Tuor came upon an elf standing beside the walls of Vinyamar, and he was Voronwe, son of Voronwe of Gondolin, who sailed on the last ship that Turgon sent into the west. But when that ship, returning at last out of the deep ocean, foundered in the great storm within sight of the coasts of Middle-earth, Ulmo took him up, alone of all its mariners, and cast him onto the land near Vinyamar. And learning of the command that laid upon Tuor by the Lord of Waters, Voronwe was filled with wonder and did not refuse him guidance into the hidden door of Gondolin. So Ulmo used Voronwe to guide Tuor into Gondolin. Yeah. Here's the funny thing. There's in the Fall of Gondolin, the book itself, this is much more fleshed out because the first half of the story is told by Tolkien and he never finishes it. So I feel like this is so brief compared to that.
Right here, Voronwe just feels like the unironic "you have one job" guy.
That's right.
Your life has been preserved for one thing only. Show this man where my sword, where the armament is, and lead him to Gondolin.
Lead him to the hidden city. That's your role, and then we don't hear from him again.
Right.
Probably Ulmo is almost the god of the waters. So is he the one sinking these other boats?
Well, so he's Vala of the waters, but he is, but Ase is the Lord of the storms. He's a lesser.
That's right.
He's not one of the greater Valar, but he is said he's the one that almost went to Morgoth's side. Morgoth almost tempts him over to his side back in the beginning, and he's the one that is blamed / credited for the death of most people in ships. He creates storms and he delights in their fury, and many people are wrecked. Many all the ships that are shipwrecked we kind of hinted that it's him. It's on him.
Yeah.
This is where the famous saying from the from the Numenorians came from. What is that? The sea is always right.
Oh dear.
All right, so I digress. Hey, we can put that right there on the thumbnail.
That's right.
Ulmo, Ase, the sea is always right. Actually, here, Ulmo is kind of always right, though. He does the right things. He does the things that are there to help. He does. I don't think he likes the idea that the Valar are abdicating all the responsibility. Perhaps that's because he knows what the song is more than anybody else, because the waters are. They have more of the song in it than any other part of creation.
Which is interesting, though, right? Because it says that Manwë is closest in thought of all the Valar, and that's why he's the chief of the Valar. So you have this sort of contravening reality of the waters having the song of creation in them, and so Ulmo takes a more direct hand. Because the people of Iluvatar, the children of Iluvatar, are more dear to him, clearly. Mm-hmm. And because of his love of the song, probably. But Manwë has the job of being closest in mind to Iluvatar, and it's very close, very sharply hinted at the end that it isn't yet the time. Manwë says no to Ulmo's plea because it isn't yet the time. And the time has to come with the children of Iluvatar making their own plea directly to the Valar, as we'll see in the next
It's kind of like Ulmo is the John the Baptist. He's preparing the way for the coming of all the Valar. Ultimately.
All right, it feels like church in here now. This is great.
All right, so speaking of too much church here. So the city burns. So here's what happens. So Gondolin is betrayed. The bitter Maeglin is captured. He makes a lot of trips out, illegal trips outside of the leaguer of Gondolin, so beyond the boundaries that you're allowed to go.
Betrayed, but Idril, the far-seeing and wise Idril, decides, you know what, we might need an escape.
And the increasingly sad Idril, makes reference to that too.
But she creates. She does it say she forges whatever she establishes an escape route, a hidden escape route that she tells no one about.
Yes,
I guess in like for all these females that they say the insight of the feminine mystique is perhaps pretty deep, and even in here you can see this, between her and Luthien and Melian, that they see more than perhaps the pride of the men around them do.
Right. Well, that's another thing. Yes, that's perfect, Jonathan, because Tolkien is very big on the wisdom of the lordly women. They have a wisdom, they have a foresight that the men do not, the males do not. So the passage you're referring to is, "But Idril Celebrimbor was wise and far-seen, and her heart misgave her, and foreboding crept upon her spirit as a cloud. Therefore in that time she let prepare a secret way that should lead down from the city, and passing out beneath the surface of the plain, issue far beyond the walls northward of Amon-Gwareth. And she contrived it, that the work was known but to a few, and no whisper of it came to Maeglin's ears." So she basically prepares this tunnel under the plains directly north towards Morgoth's fortress, which comes in handy when Gondolin is betrayed. So there is, in fact, a remnant that survives. Morgoth captures Maeglin, threatens him with torture, and Maeglin quickly caves and says, "Sure, I'll tell you where Gondolin is." And Morgoth's so happy, he says, "I'll give you Idril and lordship of whatever's left of Gondolin once we take it." So here they come. The dragons have been breeding. There's lots of them. The Balrogs come with all armies of orcs, and they come right over the tallest mountains in the north, straight to Gondolin, and take advantage of the elves at a festival, which is, as is Tolkien's wont, yet another reflection of Morgoth and Ungoliant taking advantage of a festival in Valinor to kill the two trees, if we remember back to the beginning of the book. And Gondolin is attacked and destroyed in a tremendous battle, of which, and then 2 Balrogs die and 2 great elf lords. So, which has led me now to my corollary to one of the great laws of Tolkien's world, which is no one ever gets to kill a Balrog without dying themselves. That's basically one of the laws. So Gandalf can't kill a Balrog without dying. Ecthelion can't kill a Balrog without dying. Glorfindel can't kill a Balrog without dying. I got 3.
Fingolfin?
Does he kill a Balrog? Do we see him say that he kills a Balrog?
I don't know.
He fights.
Then he fights 3 of them, right?
Yeah, Fingolfin fights them. I don't think he kills them. He gets killed by them. So you can't kill a Balrog without dying yourself, which is a corollary to Tolkien's law number 42 corollary. So anyway, the Lord of though speaking of the death of Fingolfin, not Fingolfin, you meant Fingon.
Fingon.
Fingon?
Yeah.
Sorry. Fingolfin died at Morgoth's hand.
Yes, right.
So
it's an F-named elf with a crown on his head.
It's one of those effing elves.
I still don't get it right after all these months and months.
So Fingon died. Gothmog stomped his head into the ground after he died, and Gothmog, though, takes it on the chin in this one. And in the invasion of Gondolin, Ecthelion, Lord of the Fountains, and Warden of Gondolin, ends up in a one-on-one battle with Gothmog, and they kill each other. So Gothmog has now gone into the timeless void, or wherever it is that flaming demons go. And then a remnant escapes of the sack of Gondolin. Oh, first Tuor kills Maeglin, throws him off, and he bounces. That was a pretty cool visual.
3 times.
Bounce. like boom. The fact that Tolkien felt the need to tell us that he bounced 3 times down from the top was pretty funny.
I thought that was funny too.
So Tuor escapes with Idril and a handful of survivors, including one of them, the great Lord Glorfindel. And Glorfindel, though, after they escape through that secret tunnel, they are seen by orc spies because they have a long ways to go through the mountains even after the tunnel exits. And they are seen by a Balrog leading a band of orcs, which is interesting. And
let's remember though that Balrogs are not the size and scale of the Balrog in Peter Jackson's films is not the size and scale of Balrog in Tolkien's books.
Right. Although I, to my mind, I think Jackson's film does it too much, but I can see it being larger. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a 20-foot Balrog or a 15-foot Balrog leading orcs.
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah, I'm with you on that. So
Glorfindel fights him, and they fight and they fight and they fight and they kill each other because that's what you do
That's
with
what happens
Balrogs.
with Balrog.
and meanwhile, the orcs who are attacking the survivors are about to overwhelm them, and the eagles show up because that's what the eagles do in times of great need. The eagles are coming to you, and they kill all the orcs. So actually, Morgoth doesn't even hear for a long time about this escaped band because the eagles make sure that none of the patrol survives.
Right, yeah.
So, as to go circle back to what Dan said at the beginning, the good guys actually escape this time, and they head down through a couple of different stops. Down through the land of the willows, which is south down the river Syrian. Is it the land of the willows or the forest of the willows? What was it called? Land of willows. Nan Tothrin. For the power of Ulmo yet ran in that great river, and it was about them. So they healed in land of the willows, and they made a feast in memory of Gondolin. And yes, because it is a law in Tolkien's world that someone must sing in every chapter, they sing. And the warriors of the and for Glorfindel the beloved, many were the songs they sang under the willows of Nan Tothrin in the waning of the year. All right, so singing occurs. Good, we can check that box for this chapter, and then they head all the way down. Yeah, you're going to show us where that is.
No, I was just like, I just realized what you were saying when you would check that box. The singing box. We must have
someone sing.
Song.
I think actually it is. I mean, maybe one chapter that it wasn't. Someone literally sings every chapter, even if it's a tiny little thing. So yeah, keep going down. There it is, Nan Tothrin, Valley of the Willows.
So they essentially come all the way from up here, all the way down there. Mm-hmm. It's quite a ways. That's like way past Nargothrond here, past the gates of Syrian.
And so they stay there for a while, and then eventually they head down further down all the way to the ocean, and in Arvernian. Why did I have a hard time with that? Arvernian. In that land, they dwell at the mouths of the Syrian River, and they're joined basically by all the survivors of the elves of note, like Círdan, etc., who come from all around, and that's where the elves are the last place the elves are living, aside from some in Osirian on the eastern end of Beleriand. But basically, everybody else it's all been burned to the ground. Morgoth has in fact defeated the Noldor, and he laughs.
Let me get this quote because it really struck me as how Morgoth thought of the Noldor. He said, "The oath of Fëanor never harmed him." Right? I'm trying to find the right quote. That was my note right here. But he's like, "Oh yeah, that oath. Yeah, that was actually a great thing for me. Like whatever oath that Fëanor thought he was going to take, like, and even though Fëanor knew at the very beginning, like we won't defeat Morgoth with this, it didn't even harm him. It actually helped him.
And he even says he was willing to give up a Silmaril. It says, but Morgoth thought that his triumph was fulfilled, recking little of the sons of Fëanor and of their oath, which had harmed him never, and turned always to his mightiest aid."
Wow. Yeah. And he regretted not the one Silmaril that he had lost, for by it, as he deemed, the last tread of the people of the Eldar should vanish from Middle-earth and trouble it no more. But he gave no notice of the dwelling of them by the waters of Syrian. And so he thought probably at that point, he's like, yeah, they're so small, I don't even have to worry about it because the rest of this land is all mine now.
He went,
all done. Game over.
All done. I mean, look. If you look at that map that we were looking at a second ago, it is game over. Like essentially every single region. There's Easterlings living where the house of Fingolfin used to dwell. The elves have been driven out of every place that they had. All of their strongholds have been destroyed, betrayed, and destroyed, from Nargothrond to Doriath to Mithrim to Gondolin. Everything's dead. Elves have lost, and Morgoth has won. And even along the coast, we were told all of the strongholds of the elves of Círdan were destroyed and brought low. So Morgoth has won. That's less than 600 years from the beginning of the First Age and the death of the two trees, or the arrival of the Noldor in Middle Earth, I should say. He's brought it to a close, or so he thinks.
That seems like such a short period of time compared to what happens in the Second Age and the Third Age.
Isn't it? But that's been the bulk of everything we've talked about.
I know. And there's all these unfinished tales of everything else that take up these, how many years? 3,000 something, 3,000. I can't remember.
It's fascinating because we have the beginning of Thingol and Melian, of Eldamar. I'm just going back to Fëanor. So, chapter 6 of the Quenta Silmarillion is Fëanor's birth and his crafting of the Silmarils. And so we have 5 chapters of the creation story, essentially, and, the Vala Quenta is before that. So 5 stories of the age before the First Age. And then you have chapter 6 through chapter 24 for the First Age. Well, I guess chapter 6 isn't the First Age, but essentially this is the story of the Noldor from chapter 6 through chapter 24. And then Tolkien has one section on the Akalabeth, and then another section of the Rings of Power, and then that's it. So his whole focus, the bulk of the entire book of the published Silmarillion, anyway, published by his son, not by him, obviously, but is about the Noldor, and it's a story of, it's a tragedy, right? It's a story of a fall of a people. Sure, in the end, the Valar come back, spoilers, and defeat Morgoth, but they defeat Morgoth. In the defeat of Morgoth, this entire land of Beleriand is sunk under the ocean.
That's no victory. The price of winning is a price of losing everything.
Yep.
Everything that was there before, except for if you're going scuba diving off the shores of that river of gold. What river was it? The gold
river has all the gold of Nargothrond or of Doriath in that one river. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, guys, I think we're on to the last chapter. Any final thoughts we want to peruse?
No, it's been a while coming, but Arendelle is finally here, so we get to see the a literal star in the making.
All right. Well, we do have some very pointed questions from our members. So if you want to hear those questions where we address things like, what are the 7 names of the city of Gondolin? Because he does mention 7 names. And if you have the book of the Fall of Gondolin, those are mentioned actually in there. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at the differences between Lúthien's father and Idril's father. And a little bit about the dragons, and again about the Valar, because that's a thing we always have to talk about. But yeah, if you want to get those and you want to ask those questions, become a member. Go to theonering.com/member, and it's $4 a month. First month is free, so you can ask the questions in our Discord chat there. And if you want to do even more, like Adam and Linnaelan and Chook, you can become a supporter, a sponsor, and do $20 a month, and we'll get your name here. We'll give you an extra little feather in your cap when we meet you one day. But no, we appreciate the support. It really helps us keep doing this, keeps the proverbial lights on here. And we love having the chat. And hey, since we're doing the we're doing the live stream on Friday, if you are a member, there is a chat room for questions to ask during the live stream. So we'll be monitoring that, and then you can just ask us questions without having to do like a super chat or anything like that. You can just become a member and ask as many questions as you want there. Just don't start spamming the questions. It's not like an AMA on Reddit or anything like that. So yeah, we hope to see you guys there. And one more thing though, before we close out.
If you like Tolkien.
And that's the book, The Fall of Gondolin. I mean, I don't think there's any other book to bring up if you like Tolkien here. And what's really sad about the book, The Fall of Gondolin, is that there's still not a complete story of the Fall of Gondolin in there. Tolkien, the last version, I think it's called the last version in it. If I look at it, let me bring it up here on my Kindle app, because I don't have a paper copy handy here. but he does call it the last version. The last version of the story actually ends with Tuor talking to Ecthelion before heading into Gondolin. And it's just like, oh, you have 70 pages, like of what is like 3 pages in the Silmarillion, you have 70 pages detailing all that happens there. And it's so much more engaging, and it's written more like in the style of the Children of Hurin. So it feels like a tale that you can sink your teeth into, and then it just ends. And it was so sad to me when I read that, when I got that book, and I was like, oh, hey, no, it's just over. Dang it. So it's like Tolkien wrote, the last line that Tolkien wrote about between Ecthelion and Tuor is, then Ecthelion said at last, now no further proof is needed, and even the name he claims as son of Huro matters less than this clear proof that he comes from Ulmo himself, and at this point he would lead him in. But Christopher Tolkien writes, here this text comes to an end, but there follow some rapidly written notes sketching out elements of the narrative as my father at that time foresaw it. Tuor asked the name of the city and was told its 7 names. Ecthelion gave orders for the sounding of the signal, and the trumpets were blown on the orders of the Great Gate, then answering trumpets. So Tolkien knew what he was going to write, but it was never finished. And when was this version written? It was in 1951. So right around the time that Fellowship of the Ring was published, right? Was that 51 or 52? So he was even, he was still writing these things as he was writing The Lord of the Rings, because I still think his heart was in this more even than The Lord of the Rings. But yeah, check it out. The Fall of Gondolin. I'll put a link below. I'll put a link in the show notes. And it's still worth your read. I mean, some of particularly that part of it. And if you really want to get into some of the sketch, the literary sketching that Tolkien did around it, some of the notes, where it came from, I guess they also have the version in the Silmarillion, so you can kind of compare back and forth really easily. But it does make the Silmarillion one feel really brief, and that is painful. So I didn't reread this part of the Fall of Gondolin or the story of Tuor before going through the Silmarillion. I read it
I did not either.
Years ago, but I haven't read it recently. But I do remember thinking like, this is great, and it's over. It's just so hard to swallow. So anyway, check it out. Fall of Gondolin, still available, I'm sure, at Kindle and paperback. I don't know if it's available in hardback still. But yeah, all right, guys, we are going to head over into the extended podcast. Again, if you want that, go to theonering.com/member, become a member, $4 a month. And the first month is free. So you can get our extended podcast with our cool questions from people that are cooler than you.
Bye, freeloaders.
Oh, I meant you and Dan.
Oh, right. Of course.
Sorry, yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right. See you guys later.